Hello and welcome everybody to another live session for day 2 at International Leadership Week 2021. I'm Jay Luddit, I'm the Marketing Director at the Institute of Leadership and Management. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in today and of course to our special sponsors, that's Belbin and Edinburgh Business School. In this session we're joined by Erik Meijer from Germany, and we'll be hearing about the disruptive mindsets that Erik thinks is needed for environment, social and governance futures, otherwise known as ESG. Erik is a global customer specialist at the growth incubator Mach49. He's a steering board member at Fairphone and also an advisory board member at Telekom Management Forum, amongst lots of other things. As always, please do submit your questions throughout the presentation. You can do that through the control panel to the side of your screen. You can also use the hashtag ILW21 if you'd like to join the conversation on your preferred social media channel. And finally, to help us inspire great leadership everywhere, I'd like to hand over to Erik. Erik, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Jay, and thank you for having me on the summit, which is already kicked off greatly yesterday by Elliot, and we have Henry Mintz back today. So I'm honored to be in such a lineup, and we'll make that bar happen. So I'm Erik Meijer. I will show you what my functions are. So I work at Mach49, which is a growth incubator for global 1,000 companies, and we do 4 things. We launch ventures for our customers. We build incubators, so we do multiple ventures, and we build the framework around the venturing so that we have multiples going on. And then we do corporate venturing, which means the financing beyond those startups, and how do you build a portfolio of startups that can help you keep abreast with your market and things happening outside of your market, which might be very crucial for your future. And then the first part is bring Silicon Valley inside, which means if you work with ventures, if you work with a venture portfolio, that needs speed, that needs a lot of speed. So inside of the firm, inside of the mothership, as we call it at Mach49, you will have your HR department, and that HR department needs to work in a venture mode. Parts of those people and parts of the people in your finance department also need to return calls in 48 hours, etc., etc. So what we do there is that we don't suffocate those startups in the corporate environment as we know it. Also, a very large part of our current work is ESG focused, and as you all are very aware, COP26 just finalized, and there was a new direction by the IFSR, so the International Finance Reporting Board on Sustainability, which means the future will be largely predominantly in sustainability. My other 2 functions is I am a board member at Fairphone. What is Fairphone? Fairphone is a phone that is made of conflict-free minerals. It's a phone that you can self-repair, and it's a phone where the working force behind the phone also gets a fair salary. So it's not playing on one dimension of ESG, but it's playing on multiple dimensions of ESG. And also here I represent 2 major ESG investors. The company is headquartered in the Netherlands. It's very active in Europe and will now in this growth phase expand globally. And finally, and least but not last, I'm an advisory board member of the Telekom Management Forum. What is this? Telekom Management Forum is the global association of over 800 telecommunications companies, so cable companies, mobile companies, and satellite companies, together with their suppliers. So these are the traditional supply side, traditional Nokia, Ericsson, but also the IBMs of this world, the specialized like the Pegasus systems, what have you there, all there. The specialty of the forum is that they execute innovation projects which are named catalysts. So here is extremely special because in this environment, you have competitors working together on launching, say, something like 5G. Why is this happening? Because the new innovation efforts are so capital and people and technic and cross-border intensive that this is a strategy that is very provisional for all, and you yourself can think about open source strategies, which is a parallel here. Right. So let's get into our talk of today. Disruptive minds for ESG futures. And why disruptive minds? Because we know pretty well coming out of COP26 that everything that we have tried or are trying so far is not sufficient, and the COVID pandemic is also a very clear indicator that we're not solving to our best of our knowledge. And also priming on Henry later today, you'll see his work was all about managers and executing. So we'll go to the next. We'll go to our poll now. Let's see this. And I want to know from you, because we have a collective wisdom here online, what do you see as the most important leadership skill or dimension for ESG? So the Institute has 5 dimensions of leadership, and I would like you to vote on which one you think is most predominant for yourself to go forward in executing ESG. So you'll see the poll coming on your screen. Thank you, Jane. And I will just talk a bit through, and Jane, just give me a hint when the polling is in. So if we talk about authenticity, we talk about courage, we talk about being credible, but we also being open and adaptive to situations. If you talk about vision, you need visions beyond your industry. Now you see in innovation that a lot of attackers come out of the industry, and you need to be able to answer to that. Another one is achievements. Do you take initiative? Are you managing execution well? And can you focus on performance? Can you make performance happening? And then ownership, of course, the courage to drive new forward, being self-aware is very important. And then into collaboration is we see building relationships extremely important, influencing beyond the boundaries of the organization. And we have to poll in. Jane, do you want to talk to the numbers, or shall I do that for you?
I'm happy to do that for you. It's fine. So we have authenticity, which is 50%. We have vision, which is 31%. Achievement, we have 0 actually. And ownership, 13%. And collaboration, we have 6%.
Wow, I think this is a super example of not knowing what you not know. So I will show you how I have been ranking them. And this is a super surprise, because you can imagine what I have done. I have ranked achievement first. And that's an interesting one, because it's my perspective. But the right answer is, of course, you have to double down on all in ESG environments. And what you choose is for you, and it will apply to your situation. But what is extremely important is you do this for yourself, and you keep doing it for yourself. Because if you see the new ESG environments coming towards you, you can compare this with Olympic Games. And what do athletes do? They train extremely hard every day. So you need to get every day at it and double down on it. And the big disappointment at the end is actually on Olympic Games, that only number 1, 2, and 3 get a medal, and the rest can go home. And that is a bit the same in the ESG environment. If we don't get it right, we actually don't have a home anymore. So this is extremely important to get it right and to keep going at it. So I had, on the disruptive forces, I see at the moment an immediate change upon us. So out of COP26, there's no dilling around anymore. We need to act, because we have the climate goals, we have the degrees, and if we don't act anymore, if we stall longer, it's not going to happen. And the consequences will be dire. But also COVID is an extreme example of immediate change needed. We are now in the 4th wave of COVID, and we haven't done proper sunset reviews. We haven't been able yet. We look a bit helpless, and I think Henry will talk about this afternoon too, is for a collective brain globally dealing in such a way with the pandemic, it's a bit shameful for us as human beings. So what then do you see at Disruptive Minds doing at creating achievements is executing ventures. So what I'm doing in my normal job is getting to portfolio of ventures and think new. And this is very hard. Think about your own youth when you try to do something and your parents said no, and you would try it again, you would hurt yourself, you would try it again and try it again, and then until you believed it hurt, right? And your parents already saying to you, this hurts, wasn't enough, you wanted to try it yourself. So what we need to do with organizations now is to unlearn, to de-learn, to think new. And this is very important because the business models of the future won't be the business models of today. And we need to, before we start making something, we need to calculate all the effects in ESG that we don't see. So building for growth is much, much simpler than building for ESG. Because as you know, we have our scope 1, what we do ourselves, we have our scope 2, what we do as suppliers, and scope 3, what we do with our end customers and all the others. So these dimensions are huge and need to be thought pretty intensively. Also, what we need to do, and Henry will come back to this, is you need to do, try, and do again and go at it. So at Mach 49, we just don't interview 5 or 6 people, we interview hundreds of executives. And out of that is a distillation of what that new venture could be. And then we don't take it for granted. Then we start testing in that field and come back to those executives with first MVPs and go test again. And this is like a very intensive, say, exercise, which is also driven by numbers and driven by numbered feedback. So not by a vision that, like, you think will work, but by intensively testing, retesting, and new thinking. And the important part is, and we come to our next point, is I had collaboration as next, because I see collaborating with 1 or 2 parties as extremely complex. So if you look at what you need to do now as an executive, is you need to drive with clients and key partners next innovations. And normally you had authority over your teams and in your R&D and in the boundaries of your organization. But now it becomes driving that with clients. So through your boundary with key clients, looking at the same picture and executing with them. And guess what? It won't be authority which helps you there, but it will be influence and credibility which gets you over. And very important is solve together. We won't be able to solve ESG on our own. We need to do this together. I think COP26 is again a very good example of it, that we can solve it for the for one part of the globe, but then we haven't solved it for the other part of the globe, which was very important to recognize from the stances of India, of China, in the stopping with coal. So they said, like, we can't flip immediately, but we are very geared towards this. We want to do this, but we can't switch it off tomorrow. So very important. And then the higher complexity. What you see now is that we have much more complex business models and much more data points. And COVID is a fantastic example of it. Before we had COVID, nobody knew about zoonotics. What we also see here is we have an exponential effect of COVID. So if you have an infection case, it goes 2, 4, 16, and et cetera, et cetera. And finding the basis of this and mitigating with these problems is really looking at data sets and applying machine learning and applying computational excellence to these data sets, but also asking the questions, the deeper questions, why is this happening? I give you an example. If you work in renewable energy, you want to deploy renewable energy into, say, your production process. Now, this can be done with renewables from third parties, but you can also do it yourself. So here, again, you have a balance. I can put solar on my own roofs, but I can get it from my energy company. So how do I get to my ESG goals for my investors quickly? And can I deploy both strategies in executing this and influencing my partners to co-invest with me? And this is a completely different setup than I was on myself, on my complete own would implement this. And there you go from a centralized provision of energy, which you see the energy companies do, to a decentralized provision of energy. And what you need in there is a very high amount of communication. And that's where the TM Forum comes in. Because if we start to operate decentralized networks, we need to know who's putting energy in where, and we need to know who wants to use it where. And as far as you already know, like the sun is not shining at night, and when do we need more energy? When we're at home at night. So how do you like then store that energy in that network in a decentralized fashion that other communities and other contracts that you see there can beneficial? So I don't have I build it for myself, I use it for myself, but I build it and I can give it to other people, and I can get from other people, other companies in my supply chain or in my ecosystem. And that leads to incubating portfolios and scenarios. So what you see at Mach49, we just don't build for our clients one venture, or we don't build a CVC around one or two, but we start to put the mechanics in place that they can multiply this process and not need to start and stop again. Because that's what you see often with innovation. They start a project, then it unluckily fails because, as you know, from innovation, a lot is not happening. But how do you take those learnings into the next phase, and how do you institute the skeleton around it so you have a very performant like heartbeat in innovation? So again, also here we need to work with scenarios, with multiple scenarios, but we also need to very much inform our people in our supply chains and in our ecosystem, but also, as you see in COVID, why we're changing tactics, why we are pivoting the approach here. And we can do that by good communication, but also by showing them out of our tests came X, Y, and Z. To really give an example is if you have a person, say if you have a fleet manager in a large corporation who needs to go green, so she or he needs to implement EVs, that is not only a fleet manager decision, but it's also a strategic decision, which then also comes from the finance department, because remember, those 7 trillion of investors want you to get better on your ESG performance. So suddenly this fleet manager, or she or he, gets a lot of external and non-normal fleet people onto her or his desk and asking questions which are not normal fleet questions. Because remember, a normal fleet question is all about TCO performance and driver adherence. And now suddenly we need to adhere to green goals. And as you might well understood, is that a current EV vehicle has a whole different set of parameters, and I just don't can send it to the repair shop because mostly of that vehicle is a battery, and that battery needs proper loading, it needs proper deloading, it needs proper handling, etc., etc. So we get a lot of different players here at the table, which gets that complexity up. Then ownership. What you see in this situation is also grow and save in parallel. So why we need to really think when we do ventures is how can I build for 1 or 2 key clients, but how can I also automate that at the back end, a long tail of an industry can also consume. And what you see in the telecom industry is that we start to build a complete set of APIs for our key clients, but we also put them on platforms so that smaller players and SMEs in the market can also benefit. And as you well know, 70 to 80% of the global market are SMEs. So if you have sold it for your large key clients, you then can put it open on your platforms, and then you can start to save and grow at the same time. And then, of course, as I just said multiple times, is we have ESG imperatives now. It's not ESG options anymore, it's ESG imperatives. So from the investor base, they want you to adhere to ESG, but also from a governmental standard, they want you to adhere. And this is a whole different playing ground in that vision will come into that board and in that strategy. And it needs an incredible amount of transparency because now the investors don't want you to say you're green, but they want proof of it. So they want you to work with rating agencies. They want you to send proof to those investors of third parties who have tested and accredited your green claims and green changes. But not also that, also the board is transferring here. So what I see working with boards in Mach49, in TM Forum, and in Fairphone is that the board becomes much more important. It's not anymore she or he, the CEO, his vision, and that team, but you see all the board members pulling together here to solve this complex puzzle. And you see very actively top organizations at the top Global 1000 getting people in their board who not only sit there to accredit what has been done, but you see a much more active role of the board members, of the non-executive directors in that board, providing not only strategy directions, but also being very helpful with their network. So getting really the management team into calls with companies who have already executed or are down the road on that execution, or getting them into contact with potential partners. And you see a lot of things happening in boards where you see also equity for non-executive board members being rewarded in this. So you see a lot more performance-based board memberships coming up. And then the last one, very important, and you rated it also very high, is authenticity. And this is extremely challenging at the moment, because I am talking to you at a 2D screen and not 3D. We're not on a conference, you can step up to me and I can step up to you, and we can't feel the room temperature and the buzz. I'm trying to be very excited talking to a screen, as you imagine now. And therefore, the idea is here, how can we create circumstances which normally were created impromptu? How can you do being together alone? And Elliot Messi did a fantastic talk yesterday, and he said the first thing when he went into COVID lockdown is he started to call his 100 people in his network to get recontact, to get in touch with them again, and to actually force him to to re-network. So here you need to seek those impromptu meetings, and also you will see that on the mind side you will embed purpose into your culture. And this means being very transparent and being very real about it. So we can't hide anymore behind organizational boundaries or behind an organizational setup. We need to literally open the kimono and being very honest and real about our intentions. And there you see company culture and individuals coming much more closer together. And you see it also in the next generation. If you look at my generation and the generation before, it was more, here's the government, it will provide for me. And now we have a younger generation, and it really asks not what can the government do for me, but this is what I will do for government. And I'm extremely happy with this very active and engaged approach, which I see in the younger generations coming into the workforce. It's a delight to work with them. It's very hard keeping up with them because they're extremely fast, and keeping abreast and keeping with them and being very honest. And these were my double downs on ESG. But as I said, this is individually for every person here or himself. And it's very important that you do this check regularly and have the reflex that being at home doesn't mean that things are going to get slower. It's going to get faster and quicker. Jay, do you want to ask me some more questions? Or
Hi, Erik. Thank you so much for giving us all that insight. This is a fascinating topic, and it's quite a fresh one, I think, for the audience at the Institute as well. Some really interesting stuff that you've talked through there. And I love the fact that you've linked some of this thinking to the dimensions of leadership that we talk about at the Institute as well. That's really great. So thank you for doing that for us. We have had some questions come through from our audience. So if you're okay to have a think about some of those. So the first one here was, so when we're thinking about ESG initiatives, do you think there's a way that those can be built into a company strategy whilst equally satisfying those stakeholders that are really interested in shareholder profit, for example?
Yeah, because if you now would go only on shareholder profit, you would put yourself outside of the movement that is happening now in financial services. So you would have a lot of distressed assets at your disposal, which nobody wants anymore. So you see already top investors going towards that green movement because they feel that at the end of the day, you're going to get the bill for everything else you do in that supply chain. And then you become extremely unprofitable. So another extreme case is energy companies who don't want to move. They get fined by government. So there was a big case in the Netherlands. We won't name any names, but that company got a very court order to say you need to move. So either, and it's also it's about our society and the things that we as a society discuss and feel are important. And you see that also in the elections here in Germany, we have a very big shift to green. So in the end of the day, the customers will just stop buying from you. And being non-honest about it won't help you at all, because the customers are very vocal. So if they don't like it, they will immediately let you know. And they're are famous, say the shitstorms, which will come very quickly to your company, and then damage can be irreputable. So that there are many examples of corporate. And we had corporate governance and greed was one of the topics which was always on our minds. How do you control this? And this had come now another dimension. How do you control that from an environmental standpoint? And to be honest to ourselves, it's not much fun in being rich alone, right? It's at the end of the day, you can. If I look at my life, I think it's a very short time on this earth, and I'm very thankful for that. And at the end of the day, that's what every headhunter asks you, what would you want to be on your tombstone? And for me, the best one would be, thank you for having me, right? Because then I would have been a value to the people that I work with, and I could look everybody in the eye, and I would have done my very best for them. And I come from a family business, so I was in diapers when my dad was running through the factory, right? And having worked in very difficult situations, needing to keep the business running for thousands and thousands of people is always very challenging. And being very clear, that you reinvest that money, you keep the business going, and in those businesses, people work for generations there. So you're not only giving people work, you're giving them meaning in life. That's super important.
Thank you, Erik. That's really
to finalize this is what we see in Mach 49 is we are a very green experienced team, and that's why we get very green experienced clients. And the people who are attracted to that company, you and that company are very close. If you don't subscribe to Mach 49's values, nothing to do there, because we work on a very high pace with each other under very difficult circumstances. We try to build ventures, and if you're not real about yourself and your team, it's going to be a short story.
Yeah, that's great, Erik. I think the importance of aligning values is key there. That's a great answer.
I think also transparency, yeah? IT and transparency gets this. So you can't fake it anymore. I think it will come up any ways of another, right? If
exactly, yeah, you've got to be authentic. Yeah. I've got another question here, Erik, and this one is about referring back to the poll that you did, and you said you were quite surprised actually because achievement didn't fare very highly with the poll, but it did in your view of this. So the question is, if the focus is on achievement, how do we sort of mitigate the risk of unethical practices going on when the focus is on achievement?
Yep, excellent question. Because I'm not talking about because the second one was high complexity. So if I just wanted to achieve and do the same, I just talked about it unlearn, just growth, money. At the end of the day, it wouldn't score at all. It wouldn't help me at all. So I'm not talking here about a achievement which is growth for all or double the revenues. I'm talking about a achievement in showing that we can solve the ESG problem. And that's maybe but it's it's a very good feedback for me, because if I would suggest that I am the smartest one here on the call, I will be the dumbest going away, because we have a collected audience here who have other experiences. And for me, it's extremely good to know what I not know and get the input in the room. So this is for me also to go back and to think, because for my I'm in Mach 49, and for us, executing on ventures is the number one. If I get a feedback from an audience that says no, authenticity is number one for me, then I should be carefully looking at my authenticity to improve, right? So it's not only growth for growth's sake, because that would be simple. That would be more of the same. The call I was thinking about, my thinking here was executing ESG as extremely complex. If you look at Fairphone, the more growth you grow with the phone, the more pollute, right? At the other end, you bring a green phone into non-green hands. So you get people thinking. So there's always this very healthy debate in the management team. Do we do this? And is it helping the company growing? Or do we do this for an ESG, or can we marry them? And this is extremely complex. So if you do a single dimension growth for revenue, build new product, throw over the wall, ready we are, not interested. But as you see with our client base, we have over 50% who is like, executing on ESG, which means before I build anything, I want to triple check because I need to take it back too. And Fairphone is not only about the phone, it's about any electronic appliance that I can't repair myself, that I can't take back, that I mine from conflict mines, that I how do you call it, stimulates like war. And these are all dimensions which are very difficult to work with. And the reporting is very minute, it's very intricate. So that's why I was thinking about achievement and collaboration, because achieving in a singular dimension, simple. We have showed this. We can make billionaires, no problem. Can we save the earth? Difficult problem. So that's the complex. It's a wicked problem, because if we try to solve here something, so you saw I just mentioned the coal example. So we want to get out of coal. Yes, we want. But you can't then ask for the other people in rural China just to switch off the heating and die because you want to don't want to see coal. You want to help them getting on renewable energies, right? And yeah, I work with colleagues in the Telekom Management Board, and my fellow CTIO of a Chinese mobile company, he has 27,000 direct reports. So if I work with my Chinese colleagues, I don't only have a problem, but I also have another dimension of a problem, right? And that's also to very much keep in perspective if you talk with other areas. And therefore, it's very important that I saw my life. I've worked in the Middle East, I've worked in Asia, I've worked in the East Coast Americas, I've worked in the West Coast Americas. In all these areas, the approaches to problems were different and the situations were different. And if you then, and that's very nice from the audience, if you then can be authentic and achieve, that would be a huge one. Do people believe that?
Erik, there's so much that we could talk about, but sadly we are out of time. So we'll need to leave it there. There's so many takeaways. I love the fact that you were talking about influence and credibility over authority earlier. I love the fact that you were talking about backing up your ESG claims if you're going to convince people to invest. There's loads of great stuff in here. I'd just like to say thank you very much to yourself for joining us today. And of course, thank you to everyone for tuning in and watching this webinar. Of course, if you'd like to carry on the conversation, please do head over to the hub on the Institute's website. And please do look at the rest of the lineup as well. It's only day 2 and we've got the rest of the week to go. So thank you again, Erik, and thank you to everyone for tuning in.
Thank you to Jay. Thank you to the Institute. Thank you to Jay. Thank you to the team. Really appreciate it. Take care.